Hello there. Hey. Game Pulse, Keith Tyler, and talking about multiplayer in games. Does every game need a multiplayer? Because it was recently announced that Batman Arkham Origins was going to have multiplayer, 8-man multiplayer, where it's 3v3v2. 3 guys are part of the Joker's gang, 3 guys are part of Bane's gang, and 2 people are playing Batman and Robin. In which it's becoming kind of a pattern that a lot of games are getting multiplayers nowadays.
Yeah, it seems like every game has multiplayer, even when the franchise starts as a mostly a huge, single-player experience. You look at the Uncharted franchise. Uncharted 2 and 3 has had multiplayer. God of War just recently got multiplayer. Tomb Raider had multiplayer. I can go on and on. Assassin's Creed, these single-player focused franchises have gotten multiplayer recently. Some good, some not so good.
Yeah, I'm open to multiplayer if you can pull it off right and make it interesting. Like, that was one of the things with Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider made its multiplayer interesting because it wasn't like every other multiplayer. But then that's kind of what did it. It was a lot of that was really far-fetched in a way. It's not how the multiplayer kind of plays. How there's one team and one team's you have this specific objective to do this game, and you can't really do anything else. And then the other team has this specific objective, but then everything else is basically your standard third-person action-adventure shooter multiplayer. I mean, and a lot of games have kind of even retracted lately having multiplayers. Look at Dead Space. Dead Space 1, no multiplayer. Dead Space 2 had a multiplayer. Dead Space 3 was a co-op, but no multiplayer. Look at Bioshock. Bioshock 1, no multiplayer. Bioshock 2, multiplayer. 3, no multiplayer. And the other franchise that comes to mind is Dead Rising. Dead Rising 1, no multiplayer. Dead Rising 2 had a weird bicycle-based multiplayer. And then Dead Rising 3, we don't know whether or not it has a multiplayer, but then, I don't think really anybody played the Dead Rising 2 multiplayer, so I don't think that either that or they'll maybe rework it and come up with something good for it. So, if you pull it off, I'm game. Assassin's Creed pulled it off. That's why I love that multiplayer. It took the single-player experience and made it part of the of a multiplayer game, and it works perfectly in my opinion.
I'm with Keith. If you can really pull it off, I think it'd be, cool. As long as it doesn't feel really tacked on. Then, when it feels tacked on and, you just did multiplayer for the sake of having multiplayer and being like everybody else, then that's when I kind of have a problem with it. I also, these franchises that have been adding multiplayer, I just don't want them, focusing on multiplayer to take away from the incredible single-player experiences that they create with the stories and the worlds and all that good stuff. I don't want, because they're focusing more resources on that to take away from the single-player. But, to be honest, I don't think every game needs multiplayer. Because you look at, games that are fine just without them, like, Bioshock Infinite.
Are you looking for
Look
me?
at that. It's one of the best games of this generation, even of all time. And it doesn't have a multiplayer, and it's fine. And people love it. People still play it all the time. If you ask me, I haven't played it yet, but mostly because, the single player is just so good. Like games like The Last of Us don't need multiplayer, whether it's good or not. It's just not needed when you have a single player that's just so damn good. But I had to say the plus about some of these franchises throwing in multiplayer is that the multiplayer experiences are different. Besides maybe Tomb Raider being, a little bit more standard third-person shooter, they're kind of, different. Look at Assassin's Creed's multiplayer. It's very different than anything else out there, which makes it fun. The Last of Us multiplayer has, is very, very different because of the way The Last of Us plays, which is cool. So that's a plus of them adding multiplayer. But if you ask me, I'm gonna say no to that. But if you pull it off, I might give it a shot.
I also think that maybe, because I've noticed a lot with me personally, and maybe it's just the way that I've done games and how I've been trained the last couple years with games is like, I'll beat a game's single player, and then after that, it's like, I might not play, unless like I really thoroughly enjoyed the single player, I might not play it again. And then there's really no replayability back for at least no investment. So then it's like, I don't know. So like if it's an game, I'm trying to think of an game that might have had a multiplayer. Let's see. No, honestly, none really come to mind. But I mean, if it were to happen, like a multiplayer, I'm like, oh, or the campaign. It's like the campaigns are the multiplayer. Like, oh, then I'll keep the game for longer. So it might save some games, but I can kind of agree some of these really big games that are fine on their own don't need multiplayer. God of War, multiplayer very much seems tacked on.
Yeah, I mean, you look at God of War for the first 3 games, it was amazing. Yeah, they didn't need multiplayer. People would still buy and play the shit out of that game. So
yeah, that's our thoughts on the games needing multiplayer. So I mean, what's your thoughts? You know, if you're watching this, drop a comment. Why not?